Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the final webinar in a series of 3 on the topic of virtual direct nutrition education for CalFresh Healthy Living during COVID-19. I want to start off by thanking you for taking the time to join us today and introducing who we have on this webinar. My name is Adrienne Markworth. I'm the Executive Director of Leah's Pantry. I'm also joined by Danielle, who can wave now, and Lauren, who can wave now, and then Carolyn and Leah and Nick, who are guest speakers from around the state who will provide their experiences today. So this webinar is funded by the CalFresh Healthy Living program. And we'll use some acronyms and terms specific to CalFresh Healthy Living today, which is SNAP-Ed in California. But for the most part, the information in this webinar is really applicable to anybody running virtual direct ed sessions. So here's an overview of the 3 webinars within this series. The first one was a planning webinar. Lauren is going to put the link to that in the chat box in case you missed it. The second webinar, which was last week, was marketing and promotion. To also put the link in there, and these will all go out on the follow-up email, and I think they're all also archived on the CVDH website. And today, finally, we'll talk about actually implementing virtual ed sessions. Okay, so before we get, we do want to what we're going to do today is do all of our content in 45 minutes, and then we're going to stay in like for 10, 20 of the sound is garbly. Sound garbly for you guys?
Yeah, actually it does.
Uh-oh. Let me turn off my video.
And Adrienne, I think you're muted now. We'll give her another 5 seconds or 10 seconds and see. Are you back?
Danielle, you might need to take over.
Okay, it does sound clear now.
It does?
Yep.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Great.
Okay, I see you didn't catch the last few things. Basically, we've just done an overview of the webinars so far, and now we are, oh, thank you. Okay, now we're trying to get our timing right as well as our audio right. So we're going to do the last 15 minutes from 10:45 to 11 for questions. So if you have to jump off, you'll get all the content, but if you want to stay on, we'll try and do a more thorough job of questions. We've also created a private Facebook group on this topic, and this is something to continue the conversation after the webinar series. So Lauren is going to put that link in the chat as well. And of course, we're recording the webinar, and we'll share the slides and recording and all the resources we talk about today by early next week. So moving on, let's take a look at our main question for today, which is how can we create meaningful and interactive experiences for participants using virtual direct education, right? This is about the experience that people have in our classes. So we'll start off today with a brief introduction of Leah's Pantry, when we will talk about some successful components of facilitation, ranging from room setup to leveraging materials. Then we'll hear our partner stories, Nick Chandler from Northern Valley Catholic Social Services, and Lena Nasser and Carolyn Proskow from Aging and Independent Services at the County of San Diego, HHSA. And then we'll do our bonus time at the end for Q&A. So similar to previous weeks, we ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask a question and the chat feature to participate and comment more easily. If your question has a quick answer, we'll probably answer it in the chat. But if it's complex, we might ask you to follow up with us separately. So to start, I'm just going to provide a quick overview of what we do at Leah's Pantry. The organization was founded in San Francisco in 2006. And our mission is to improve the health, wellness, and resilience of communities through trauma-informed nutrition. We have 3 basic strategies. One is we do our own direct implementation of products and programs, and we'll be sharing some of those experiences as we have been over the past couple of weeks. Second, we work with organizations to build capacity to integrate effective nutrition support. And last, we expand the frame of public health, nutrition, and food security, hopefully leading to some changes about how we run our programs at the policy and systems level. So before we jump into our content, we do have a question for all of you. And this isn't just about online nutrition ed, but this is kind of any meeting. So in the chat box, if you guys could throw in some ideas of, what helps you stay engaged during online meetings. I'm just going to give 30 seconds to share, and we may come back to it later, but more it's just to kind of get you guys thinking about what makes you interested and engaged. Great. Ooh, I see the reference to Kahoot. My kids are always into those. Maybe we need to start doing Kahoots in our nutrition classes. Somebody put a pin in that on my staff. Great. Yeah, agree with a lot of these, and I think echo it. And hopefully this will be stuff that you can take with you today as we talk about implementation of these webinars. Okay, so what are the components of a successful implementation? Meaningful engagement of participants starts with understanding all the components of a virtual class and then planning interaction really intentionally. So challenging yourself to keep the participant at the center will make any curriculum that you're using more effective, and you'll also have more fun in the process. Plus, the more interaction you have, the more data you have about what's working and what can be improved. So we've broken online education into the following areas. Number 1 is talking a little bit about online facilitation strategies. You guys kind of already did our work in the video chat or the web chat, but we have a couple of other things to share. Second, really maximizing your delivery platform, whatever that is. We are most familiar with Zoom, so our examples will come from there, but feel free to add in whatever platform you're using, how to set up the room and video, how to think about participant materials, class structure and content. We'll show you an example of a Food Smarts lesson plan. And then last, everybody's favorite topic, data collection. So we don't have all the answers there, but have some initial suggestions. We think the following 3 scenarios are most likely the ways you'll deliver nutrition education online. So we'll weave in guidance related to these sample scenarios. The first one is virtual class using online meeting software, so just a straightforward Zoom class. The second one would be some kind of a hybrid class using online meeting software and then interactive media or videos, and Leah and Carolyn will be sharing an example of this, and it's a terrific way to augment the eatfresh.org mini course with live interaction. And then the third scenario would be live on Facebook or Instagram using the commenting feature, and we'll talk about some features of Facebook groups that you might use as well. We've talked about that in previous scenarios. So strong facilitation is obviously the key to participant-centered delivery. Being confident and well-prepared allows you to relax and really focus on the people and be less distracted by technology transitions or just the awkwardness of doing things online. While facilitating an online class may save time in things like transit, room setup, it can be more emotionally draining. And those of you that have led Zoom meetings may have heard this Zoom fatigue kind of idea going around. So expect to be tired as you get into this. It's hard to overestimate the importance of nonverbal communication, and you have to do a lot of guessing about where people are when you facilitate online. And that means your brain's working harder, so you're more tired. One way to mitigate some of these challenges is in the beginning is to plan for 2 facilitators on a class. So if you're providing the class in partnership with another program, one of their staff members could easily serve as the second facilitator or pair up with somebody internal to your own organization. This might be easier now that people can join from any location, so it doesn't require that you're in the same room or the same space. You can join from anywhere. We've certainly been taking advantage of that in our trainings at Leah's Pantry. So you can divvy up the roles in a couple of ways. You can think about somebody doing tech support and somebody being the main facilitator. So when one facilitator is managing the chat box or the Facebook comments, the other facilitator is staying on track with the content and the lesson. This allows the main facilitator to be concerned with the overall timeline, curriculum fidelity, and whole class engagement. The other facilitator might be handling one-on-one issues, ensuring nobody gets left behind and all the questions are answered. A second way to think about this would be co-facilitation. So I heard a bunch of you in the chat box now saying, I want to hear from different people, right? Different voices, and Danielle and I will trade off today for that reason. This can be really great with live platforms to give people some variety, and then you'll be less likely to rely on materials, but keep things interesting with different people. It's more of a performance, right? When you're on something like Instagram Live. So we could also pair more or less experienced facilitators together. And that can be a great way to build virtual facilitation expertise in your organization and also provide a more consistent experience for any participant interacting with your live classes. This is also really helpful if you're trying to support multiple languages in one class. You could do breakout rooms in English and Spanish or Chinese or whatever languages you're working in. Of course, this is dependent on capacity. So we're encouraging it as a best practice. Because it also helps with the debrief, right? Being able to come together after a class with somebody and say, how did this work? What could we do better? What was your perspective? Especially because, as we've mentioned, the experience can be intense and you may not remember much after the class is finished. You may be in kind of that heightened state of arousal talking and you might not have seen all the details, but many of you will facilitate alone, and there are some ways to set yourself up for success. One great suggestion is to advertise an earlier time for tech support. So if you say the class starts at 11, say we're going to start offering tech support at 10:45 or 10:50. That gives you 10 to 15 minutes to sort of get everybody organized. Practice the activities with your colleagues if possible. Have them use the chat box while you're facilitating. See how much multitasking and your brain can handle, right? And also be really transparent. Tell participants that you will respond to messages in the chat at intervals throughout the class, but you cannot talk and type at the same time. They'll totally get it, right? Just setting those expectations ahead of time will relieve tension on your part to feel like you have to be 6 people at once. Also, if you're not feeling ready for a full class, consider leveraging technology. For example, combine a Zoom class with the eatfresh.org mini course or show a pre-recorded recipe demo, and we'll come back to that out there. I'd love to hear tips from the facilitators out there. What has helped you manage facilitation for virtual direct ed? And so throw some of those suggestions into the chat feature now so we can learn from your experience. And then we'll move on to maximizing your technology platform. Yeah, so 2 people work together, one suggestion we saw. Yeah. But we can do it alone if we have to. We'll get better at it, just again, use transparency. Just tell your participants what you can do and practicing. Good. Okay, so it looks like we hit the high notes here. Let's move on to the delivery platform. Because another component to powerful participant experience is to really, really maximize the options of your technology platform. Think about how you can make things easy for participants and easy for you. The first place to start is when participants register. You can use the online meeting registration to capture attendance information, demographic information, and even pre-tests if you're going to try and evaluate your class. Options obviously vary across platforms, but explore what you're using and find seamless ways to collect data without taking away precious class time. You should request guidance directly from your funder about what information you need and how you should capture it. All we're doing on this webinar is providing options, but we're not issuing any specific data collection guidance. Okay, registration may also allow you to send out automated features, automated reminders and calendar invites, or even invite participants to register for an entire series like we did with this webinar. While these features are more elaborate when using meeting software, private groups on social media can also capture data. Interactive media like the eatfresh.org mini course integrates this information into registration already. So, yeah, so thinking, let's see, take advantage of attendee reports. I think I covered this. Streamline, yeah, okay, I think I was just a slide behind. Okay, so Zoom, maximizing registration on Zoom. Here's an example. On the left side of this slide, you see automatic or manual approval options, opportunities for our participants to easily share the class with others, which can be a great way to do marketing and promotion, and email confirmations. These options really make a difference. Now, on the right side of this slide, you can select from pre-written questions, or you can create your own. If you're mailing materials to participants, for example, you could collect addresses. Adding specific data card questions and pre-survey questions would happen under the custom menu. So at the bottom of the slide, I've added a link to Zoom support. If you're not using Zoom, check the support materials from your platform. We know online meeting companies are hard at work adding new and tweaking features. So we really encourage you to stay up to date with your platform and use their support features to help you figure out what you're doing. Here's an example from a private group on Facebook. Yes, there isn't specific event registration. Well, you kind of can, right? You can create an event on Facebook. We'll look at that in a second, but not in the same way. But you can ask 3 questions when people join your private group. This is tricky. And the reason is it's because you can't save the data and view it after you're approved. Well, you can if you have a browser extension, which is like way beyond the scope of both this webinar and our technical ability, but you can do it if you're very tech savvy. But you can record this data as you approve members. So if you're going to do this, I highly recommend one person does the approvals and you have a spreadsheet to record the data. Some options you can ask. What are folks most interested in learning about? What device do they primarily use? Or how they learned about the class or the group. I've included a link to the support page about how to add or edit pending members in a Facebook group as well. But Facebook does have an extensive Q&A section. So regardless of platform, another option is to use a survey link as a prerequisite to registration. So if you issue a survey, at the end of the survey, you can say, okay, thank you for submitting the survey, now you can register. The meeting link of a Facebook invitation, in this case, would be provided after the survey is completed and you have whatever information you need to get started. Online meeting software companies have worked really hard to build in interaction. So this is another thing you need to maximize. You already did a lot of this research when you chose the platform, and we talked about this during the planning webinar, but now that you've actually got your curriculum and you're ready to get started, you may need to relook at those interactive features and figure out which are going to be used at different points in your curriculum. So this is going to require some creativity and flexibility, similar to what you would need when teaching in person. For example, you might have a whole group discussion with a small group, but if you had a very large group in a nutrition class, you might break up into pairs or triads. So the same is true online. If it's a small group, you may have everybody unmute or have an open discussion, but with a larger group, you might use the chat feature or the breakout rooms. Or if you're expecting to use the chat feature, but all of a sudden people are calling in by phone, which happens, then you may have to invite people to share verbally. So our advice in most cases would be to plan for 2 scenarios if you're not exactly sure of your attendance, so that you can easily adjust. Be sure to practice using the features ahead of time so that the transition is smooth during the virtual sessions. And again, be transparent. Nobody's expecting perfection. So you can just say things like, wow, a lot of you are calling in. I had thought we'd use the chat. I'm now going to change my mind and invite you all to participate verbally, right? There's no reason why you feel that you need to be on the spot. Walk people through your decision process, and then that will also calm you down. You'll also want to think of what features complement the different activities you're planning to facilitate. So what we're going to do now is walk through some features, the type of activities that might complement them. We're going to use examples from Food Smarts because that's what we know and many of you are familiar with, but these types of activities are common across different curricula. So you may be using a different curriculum. You can play along and think what activity from this curriculum would work well with this interactive feature. Okay, so let's start with polls. Polls are easy to use, but they do require advanced setup. You can edit them on the fly, but it's a little bit time consuming. So one suggestion I have is to name them in a way you can easily reference later. Here's a bad name for a poll. Poll number 1 with no information. Give yourself some idea of the content of that poll in case you switch things around. Some fun ways to use polls could be voting on recipe ideas for the next class, which is the option that I provided on this slide. You could share common barriers to eating breakfast, or a quick intro to a rainbow of fruit and veggie activity could be which colors participants eat most or least often. One suggestion I have is to make a few extra polls that you can pull out if you have a quiet group. Again, this goes to giving yourself some options. Don't overdo it, of course, but it's nice to have options if people are shy to use the chat box or audio feature at first. Okay, next one is Whiteboard. There we go. Hi, Danielle. Looking good on the whiteboard. These are great for collaboration. So our example here is within Food Smarts, we have an activity called Make These Meals Healthier, where you start with one meal, in this case, a hamburger, fries, and a shake, and then you think through how you would change the meal to make it a bit healthier. So as the facilitator, you could type in the new meal as the group creates it. There's also a drawing feature that you could utilize. There's so many features within features, but again, we encourage you to explore and experiment. All right, we're all familiar with the chat box. And this is a great feature when you want participants to list things, such as populating different groups from a My Plate. It also allows everybody to participate without taking up too much airtime. It's really, I think, a democratic way of collecting information instead of always getting things verbally. So with more elaborate questions, though, having participants use their audio is perfect for smaller groups, especially with discussion-based activities. If you have a larger group where the rhythm is off, where people keep talking over one another or there's audio problems, you may want to ask participants to raise their hands on the video like this, or just using the button. Sometimes actually just raising your hand on video is easier than finding the button to raise your hand. Also, I encourage you to think through how to manage time. Offer verbal cues like, we have 5 minutes for this discussion. So if we could have 5 people share a brief story or idea, then participants get a sense of how long to talk for, because we know that maintaining curriculum fidelity is essential in SNAP Ed, but it can be more difficult to transition people when you're in an online meeting versus in person. Also, sharing your video. We've noticed this as a feature for facilitators. It really helps when you guys are on video and we're talking to you, because then we see, did that joke land right? Are you smiling, right? Like, are you looking at us? Are you engaged? But it's also a great way for participants to show you what they're doing. So if you're having participants complete a scavenger hunt, like today we're going to talk about nutrition labels. Did everybody bring a food item from your pantry that has a nutrition label? Barbara, can you share what you brought, right? So then all of a sudden the participants become able to share as well as we are. They can show their nutrition label, they can show the colors of the veggies they found in their fridge, they can show an unusual item or ingredient that they need help with. Okay, breakout rooms. We don't know whether this feature is available on other platforms, but they can be helpful on groups. So I'm not going to go over breakout groups specifically today, but you've used them before, probably on a Leah's Pantry training. Okay, so all these features I've covered are primarily for online meeting platforms. But you can pull some of these ideas into private Facebook groups. And here's some ideas on this screenshot using posts, Facebook Live comments, poll features, rooms, file sharing. Start out simple, but don't be afraid to experiment. Ask yourself, how can I present this content in a way that it will be most rewarding and impactful for participants? Then see what tools you have. So now Danielle is going to share some technical suggestions that will help you to produce some high quality content.
Great, thank you, Adrienne. So now that you've gone through your lesson plan and optimized your interactive features, let's move to some more technical suggestions for filming and streaming. So I want to share a resource that we created called Best Practices for Filming and Streaming. Lauren is going to share that in the chat box now. I want to highlight a few components of this guide, starting with room and video setup. These details impact participants' experience. Things like good lighting, orientation, and good sound will create a more positive experience. And it will likely mean a more effective session as well. That said, we are not expecting you to be professional filmmakers, so don't worry about being perfect. But the things I'm going to share now are basic things that should definitely help with filming quality. So the first is keep your face well lit and minimize distractions. And actually, Adrienne, you can go back to the slides. We'll go to slide 25. Thank you. And then make sure the device for filming and streaming is fully charged or plugged in if possible. You don't want to cut out unexpectedly during the session. And then be sure to choose the right orientation of your video. So for example, Insta TV or Facebook Live are mostly viewed vertically to optimize viewing on a mobile device, or online meeting software is mostly viewed on a laptop or desktop horizontally, but also streams horizontally on mobile devices. So you just want to keep these things in mind as you're filming and match how you're orienting the screen to how participants will be experiencing it. And setting up your filming device on a flat surface and keeping it steady for all scenes is really important. Inexpensive tripods can be useful for mobile devices. Be sure to test your microphone for clarity and consider purchasing a quality wired headset or speakerphone. Most of us at Leah's Pantry found that our microphone on our computer is fine, but Adrienne really loves her Snowball microphone. And we're gonna include a link to that. And if you plan on doing a live cooking demo, you might wanna start with a larger frame for filming those demos. You can use a tripod with a phone, or I just have books or boxes kind of stacked up. If you're planning to use just one device, practice transitioning so you can quickly get the right scene into view. Or if it's an option, consider logging in with a separate device for the demo, such as your phone. That also means you don't have to move your laptop during the session. And there are a few ways to do this. You can do it via screen share and either share a second camera, or if you have a webcam, share that. So I do not have, and the other option is to use your iPhone to share. So I don't have an iPhone, I have an Android, so I figured out a third way to do this. You can join the meeting as another participant using your Android phone. So you can see in this screenshot that the primary camera, which is my phone, is further away, which would be a more appropriate frame for a food demo. And then the little photo on top is just from my laptop. So all of this can be a lot to manage. So if you want to take some pressure off during the live session, you can also play a pre-recorded video for the food demo. You can pre-record yourself and play on Zoom. So make sure to click the share audio or share computer audio just to make sure that participants have sound. So this would be a good thing to test out ahead of time with a colleague. Or you can use someone else's video. Eatfresh.org has videos of many recipes, and here's a screenshot of our YouTube playlist. And some benefits of using recordings include less stress, more time to prepare for activities and engagement. And this is also a good way to leverage videos you may have already created, but using them in a more interactive format. And if you're using someone else's video, this means lower food costs and also a little more variety, which we mentioned before. So participants are seeing a different face, place, and facilitation style. And we can't emphasize practicing enough. So the learning curve can be steep, so know that things will become easier over time. And when you do practice, make sure you do it during the same time of day if natural light is an issue, using the exact same equipment, and also having someone else log on to see what it looks like from a participant perspective. And it's helpful to do that from both a mobile phone and a laptop, since the experience can be different. So let's move on to materials. These can really complement direct ed sessions, but are a bit more complicated in virtual settings. The materials you use are dependent upon the platform that you're using, how participants are accessing the class, options for delivery or pickup of participant resources. So these are all things to consider. And here are some examples of materials you can use: physical workbooks, digital files, slides, posters, props, and participants in, or materials in participants' home. So I'm gonna provide a couple examples of how you could use some of these materials based on the earlier scenarios we outlined. So I'm combining the first two scenarios we shared. So these are materials you could use in a virtual class using online meeting software. This could be with or without interactive media component. Some materials that are particularly useful with this format include slides with beautiful images and succinct text. Slides can bring nutrition messaging and activities to life. And know that you don't need to cram all information on each slide, but it can just be the starting point for conversation. You can always send additional information later. And if your organization has the resource and you're running a series, physical workbooks can be great, especially if folks are joining on their phones and don't have a large screen to view. And you could also send digital workbooks or handouts ahead of time. If the group is tech savvy, they'll be able to download these resources beforehand. And so for this, they would need a laptop. A smartphone wouldn't work for that. So to offer an example, we'll move to the next slide. So here's a slide we created for our grain game. With the in-person version, there are 10 little baggies that you'd be holding for grains, but holding up those bags of grains wouldn't translate well in the virtual class. So we limited the slide to 6 images and included a word bank. Live classes on social media present different media options. Since you can't screen share detailed slides, large posters or props can definitely be useful. Physical workbooks or handouts are helpful. Files can be uploaded to private Facebook groups. Or my favorite thing to include is participant materials from their home. So this is a big component of our online Food Smarts lesson plans. You can run a scavenger hunt activity where people can find packaged foods for a label reading activity, or foods representing different food groups from My Plate, just as an example. And while Facebook Live is an easy and familiar platform for many to use, there are limited ways of interacting with participants and using materials, so you'll want to get creative. The next component I'm going to cover is class structure. So we have to think creatively about how to ensure a meaningful and interactive experience for participants, and then determine how this can happen via the platform we're using. So we're gonna pull up a virtual lesson plan that we created for Food Smarts, and I just wanna highlight a few components of it. So Adrian's gonna pull that up. And I'll just start by saying one thing that we definitely highlight are the first 5 minutes of that session. So if you can scroll down, Adrian, those introductions and welcome are really important. So we highlight the importance of greeting participants by their name and making sure you're pronouncing their name correctly. We want everyone to feel seen and included immediately. Then we have a tech check, data collection when appropriate, and then an overview of the class, including the topics and opportunities for interaction, and then also what materials participants might want to have on hand. So class content, the next section is class content, which will include 1 to 2 topics. And we always include some interactive opportunity. And then finally, the closing section where you thank participants, ask for suggestions, and have them prepare for next week. Great, so we can go back to our slides. So we talked a little bit about collecting data during the registration process, but this is a thorny issue, so we want to just offer a few more things about this. There are a lot of tools to collect data. So registration, live polls, survey links, mailed surveys. But the 2 major challenges are that participants usually don't want to answer a survey, and you may have concerns about data privacy. So work with your organization and funder to think through online data collection strategies in advance. Do not save this for the last part. If you're able to provide nutrition education reinforcement items or NEARI items, this can be helpful. Raffles are one way to spread those items over a larger group. We do think collecting data on the front end during registration is easiest, and there are 2 reasons you might want to collect data at the end of a class or series. First, you want to know whether the participants enjoyed the class and whether the structure worked. So that process data can be really helpful for future programming. And the second type of data would be post-questionnaire for outcome evaluations. It's likely that this type of eval isn't yet required by your funder, but it's a good idea to start thinking about how you would do it if you had to, so you can test out strategies. Now that we've reviewed the components of a virtual class, here are 3 takeaways. Be sure to focus on the person in the class and the end goal. How can you best reach them, given the delivery platform you have and the type of access they have. Also, what do you want participants to walk away with? Be creative. To effectively engage participants virtually. Sometimes this means thinking outside of the box. If you feel stuck, reach out to colleagues or join our Facebook group to talk through a particular challenge. And finally, curriculum fidelity means delivering content and reaching the objectives. It's not about trying to replicate the exact instructional strategy or materials that you use in person, but again, talk to your appropriate program officer to ensure that fidelity is maintained. So now the best part, let's hear from our partners. We're gonna have both organizations share before answering questions, but feel free to type your questions into the Q&A as they come to mind. So Nick Chandler from Northern Valley Catholic Social Service is going to kick us off. And Nick, please tell us when to proceed to the next slide.
Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you guys. My name is Nick with Northern Valley Catholic Social Service. I'm a nutrition educator with the CalFresh program serving Shasta, Siskiyou, and Trinity counties. First, let me start by sharing my experience with the virtual direct education with you. I currently hold 2 virtual classes with wellness centers utilizing the Food Smarts for Adults curriculum with eatfresh.org and the My Plate Kitchen for recipe food demos. Participants at this center have various challenges ranging from drug rehabilitation, extreme poverty, and or psychological disabilities. I hold them as single sessions, typically lasting between 40 and 50 minutes in English, and participants age range between 18 to 65 years old, with mostly white participants. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So for the planning, there was a lot to plan. There were many things to consider when delivering this class virtually, and I'm assuming everyone is at a different starting point depending on your prior experience. But for me, the main considerations were participant accessibility, tech savviness, and their engagement. Several of my participants at this site only have accessibility via phone and therefore can only hear me, while those who do have accessibility needed to learn how to use the Zoom platform. Another consideration and modification I made as I progressed were my video viewing angles. Adjusting or positioning my laptop to easily view the cooking area during the recipe demo was very difficult. So to combat this, I was using an external webcam, which allowed me to much more flexibility since it has its own stand and can bend in any direction I need it to. But recently that malfunctioned and I've resorted to having my wife video me during the food demo. So that's been very fortunate. But I do love the idea of pre-recorded food demos and I plan on utilizing that tactic here this next week. Group discussion and background noise were other considerations that were considered. And for this demographic, I found that explaining the format of the session to the participants at the beginning of the meeting really helped limit distractions during the lesson, as it kept participants all on the same page and they kind of knew what to expect. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. For the marketing, fortunately, I was already implementing the direct ed at this site before the shelter-in-place orders, which made the transition and the marketing much simpler. The site facilitator has been a key component and element for me at relaying this information to my participants. We notify them utilizing the Zoom email invitation and reminding them that it's a weekly recurring event. That way they can block that day and time off for participation each week. Next slide, please. Implementing the sessions has progressively gotten easier as both participants and myself have become familiar with Zoom's functionality. Towards the beginning, guiding participants on how to use the technological devices, holding Zoom practice sessions, and knowing that this was a new process for me and everyone involved helped with the implementation of the class. Participants joined from the comfort from wherever they are, just like you guys are today, and they range from full engagement to just dialing in and engaging via audio only. A big lesson for me was to accept that imperfection and just to continuously adapt. My favorite feature in Zoom is to be able to record the session so I'm able to critique myself later and improve my future sessions. So I highly recommend that. And another tactic that I plan on trying to utilize this week is those pre-recorded videos for the food demonstrations, as I feel like that will give me a little bit more time during the food demos to be able to explain everything I'm doing, since I won't have to do the cooking and the talking at the same time. I'll be able to watch, they'll be able to watch the videos while I can guide them through any portions of the cooking. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. As mentioned, the data collection has been very difficult. I'm currently utilizing visual estimation to collect demographic data. I've tried utilizing the pairs generated link at the beginning of implementing these sessions by inputting it into the chat box feature, but my priority population were still adapting to using the platform and engaging the class. So I resorted to the visual estimation for now. Plus, participants utilizing the audio only have no way to access this, so I wasn't able to attain that. However, my goal is to get as many participants as I can to utilize the intent to change generated link, as it provides both demographic information and the intent to change statistics. Thank you guys all for letting me share my story, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate that. And all of our guest speakers today have graciously offered to share their email addresses so you can follow up with them with even more questions. So now it'd be great to hear from Lena and Carolyn. And just say next when you want us to move to the next slide. Are you two able to unmute?
Yes, I just was able to. All right, thank you guys. Okay, so before the stay-at-home order went into effect, you can go to the next slide. Before the stay-at-home order went into effect, We had just finished the Eat Smart, Live Strong series with our cohort, and we are in the process of engaging our group of older adults who are pictured right here in discussions around creating policy, system, and environmental changes, ESG changes. Of course, many of these efforts had to be postponed. However, we have continued our CalFresh Healthy Living efforts with the same group and have so far held 7 virtual classes using WebEx. So in these 7 classes, we've used 2 approved direct education curricula. In one class, we use the curriculum Choose Healthy Beverages. And then through 4 classes, we've gradually been going through the eatfresh.org mini course, basically completing 2 topics at a time. Some consistent class components that we found success in include starting off each class with a welcome and a check-in, see how everyone's doing, how they're doing with their health goals, and then sharing any COVID-19 updates and resources. And then we go into having our main lesson, which is then followed by a food demo that reinforces that lesson. And then the class ends with just helping participants anticipate what to expect in the next class. Next slide, please. All right, so some factors to consider in planning. It was important for us, most important, to know what the participants' preferences were. So from the start, we wanted to know what topics they were most interested in, what they were struggling with when they were staying at home, and then also their preferred day and time for the classes. So even after the virtual class started, it was very important for us to continue checking in with the participants and making adjustments based on their preferences. So for example, the class was initially 1.5 hours because that's how long our in-person meeting was anyways. But we've quickly learned that when meetings are online, attention spans are much shorter and that we should really make our classes at least 1 hour at max. While we knew that everyone was able to access our in-person gathering space, we questioned if everyone from our class would be able to access our virtual class. Quickly, we learned that some lacked internet access while others didn't have the proper devices. And even if they did have access, then we learned that many did not feel comfortable accessing an online platform. So in choosing a platform, that was something we had control over, we wanted to make sure that there was an easy call-in option and also an easy means to connect through a click of a link. So our biggest lesson learned is the importance of listening to our participants at start and continuing to do so. For example, from our interactions with the participants, it was clear that they had missed connecting with everyone. Particularly older adults staying at home, they missed the social interactions, they felt lonely, they felt isolated. For this reason, we were flexible and prioritized check-ins and discussions during our class. In a way, this social interaction has served as an incentive in itself, helping us have strong retention. And lastly, we've learned to be really intentional in trying to help those who call in feel equally included. So for the Choose Healthy Beverages curriculum, we mailed participants the handouts and the recipes beforehand that we'd be showing in the video conference. That way they'd have a visual to follow along with us when it came time for the class. Also in the Eat Fresh mini course, in which it's all video based, it was important for call-in participants, it was important for us in order to help call-in participants still be entertained to stop and pause the mini course at some points in case there was an important visual being shown and explain what we were saying. Also, if there was a food demo we were doing, we'd be very descriptive in what we were doing so they can, picture it in their minds. These small little things have really helped us, I think, with helping those call-in participants continue engaging in the class. Next slide, please, and please pass the mic to my partner, Carolyn.
All right, thanks so much, Lena. So luckily, we didn't need to heavily promote this class because we were working with participants from a previous cohort. So these participants were very familiar with us already, and they knew one another as well. So recruitment really wasn't an issue for us. To get a good turnout, we did make reminder calls the day prior to each class, and this really allowed us to connect and get feedback with participants individually rather than in a group setting. We really learned the importance of maintaining good relationships with former sites. So prior to COVID-19, we had just finished a series of Eat Smart, Live Strong classes with this cohort that we're working with now. And our goal has always been to expand our reach in the county and try to form new partnerships with new sites. So working with this group again really wasn't something that initially we considered, but we found that returning to former sites is really the best option for us to continue our CalFresh Healthy Living work, since we've already built the rapport with the participants and have a general understanding of what some of their needs are, having working with them previously. So next slide, please. So there were several different steps that we took to ensure that the class was successful, and we definitely learned a lot of things along the way. So first, we provided one-on-one tech assistance for participants when asked. So this might require a little bit of time investment in the beginning, depending on how tech savvy your group is. But it's really important to try to be consistent. And if you can stick to one video conferencing platform, that's really helpful. So if you start off with WebEx, try to stick with that throughout your different classes. Second, we aimed for simplicity as much as possible. So we simplified the registration process for the mini course by creating a master account. And we used a referral code that was provided by Leah's Pantry. So what we would do is we would log in for each class into this master account and watch the videos as a group. And this was really great because participants didn't have to go through the trouble of creating their own separate accounts and registering for each of the different courses. We created a pre and post test using SurveyMonkey, and we used questions from the Nutrition Basics questionnaire that's again on the mini course. The pre and post test did not collect participant names, so we were able to maintain some confidentiality there, but we were able to identify matches based off of the IP address of the respondents. So SurveyMonkey, a lot of people don't know this, but it actually collects IP address information automatically. But to make this work, it's really important for participants to use the same device when they complete the pre and the post test. So they completed the pre-test with their computer. We encourage them to, again, when completing the post test, use their computer. So we could go back and match, again, based off of IP address. After each video, we would have a larger discussion about some of the topics contained in the video. It was really important for us to strike a balance between interactive media and group discussion to keep participants engaged. Again, our classes are about an hour, so sitting for that amount of time can be a little bit difficult, I think, for anyone, whether you're working with older adults or children or whatnot. So for this reason, we only showed about 2 to 3 videos per class. For our sign-in sheet, we did use the snipping tool on our computer to take a photo of our screen, and that kind of captured the date and time. It was a timestamp for us. And this helped us also keep track of who participated via phone or video. I think that Lena would probably agree that it's key to have patience when you're transitioning to having virtual classes. You have to really anticipate technology failures and be prepared to adapt. So for example, during our 3rd class, the audio from the mini course would not play in sync with the video. We were having trouble with that, so we decided to narrate the videos ourselves using the subtitles that were provided in the mini course. So obviously this wasn't ideal, but it was really a quick adaptation that helped us avoid having to cancel the class altogether. I think, as was mentioned in Leah's Pantry's presentation, co-facilitation has been really helpful for us, especially when there's technology issues, and a smaller class size of 10 or less is recommended to allow for more intimate discussions between participants where everyone can feel heard and included. In our experience, older adults definitely prefer to talk rather than use some of the cool techie features like chat box and things like that to send messages. So that's a little bit about our experience. I think that's it from us. Hopefully you found it to be helpful. As mentioned, our email addresses and contact information will be sent out if you'd like to reach out to us, and we'd love to hear what other organizations are doing as well during this time. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carolyn and Lena. A few questions have come through. And this might be a good question for you two, Lena and Carolyn. So someone asked, when participants are not tech savvy, how could we help them complete data cards? So did you have to help people complete the SurveyMonkey data cards, or kind of what support did you offer for that?
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit to that, and Lena can maybe add anything I'm missing, but we actually were very lucky with this group. It was a pretty tech savvy group. We didn't receive any questions regarding the SurveyMonkey. In our general follow-up email, we just included a link to the pre and post tests, and Lena can maybe expand on this a little bit more, but again, we were pretty lucky. I don't know if all cohorts would have the same experience, but yeah. I don't know if, Lena, you have anything to add.
And this is actually a related question, so Lena, you might answer this as well, but you did mention, so someone asked, how do you train the participants to use online platforms for older adults and not familiar with this technology? What options are best with this population? You both mentioned briefly that you offered some technical assistance. Can you explain a bit more what that was like?
Sure, I can start off, and Carolyn, if you'd like to add. With one participant, I ended up sending her a one-on-one, a WebEx practice, so she can just practice clicking on the link, and I can walk her one-on-one, because it is more intimidating in a group to get that one-on-one support. You don't want to put anybody on support on the spotlight with that. So she ended up using that, and some people don't have a camera, so they can click on the link and see it on the screen and then call in, and so I was helping her do that. Also, me and Carolyn offer 15 minutes ahead of time. We go on, and then always let people know that if it's their first time, just come on early and we'll be there to help support them one-on-one. Hope that answers.
Great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then someone asked, can Lena and Carolyn explain again how to capture participant data in eatfresh.org mini course?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. So the when you go into the eatfresh.org mini course, there is under the nutrition basics section, there is kind of a pre and post test already set up there. So we pulled the questions from that, put it into SurveyMonkey, and again, we didn't want to collect names to maintain the confidentiality of participants, but when you export data from SurveyMonkey into Excel or any other sort of platform, it'll actually present that information, IP addresses. So that's how we were able to match between people that completed a pre and a post test.
Yeah, and a quick follow-up to that, Carrie. So Lena and Carolyn ran the mini course in a kind of creative way, in that they wanted to avoid the tech challenges of having every single participant create a new account, enter the pre and post data information and all of that. So that's why they had to take the extra step. If you just want to have your participants use the mini course and they're able to complete their own or create their own accounts, then you don't have to do that extra step. But because, and this answers someone else's questions, the eatfresh.org mini course is considered interactive media. So you don't necessarily need to have a separate class like Carolyn and Lena did. That said, it's a great way, an opportunity to bring people together, to offer that kind of social connection. So they used it in a really creative and smart way for their audience. And then, so this is a broader question and kind of related. When participants are not tech savvy, how could we help them complete data cards? And this is open to Nick, to Carolyn and Lena. Did you think through alternative ideas other than sending them links to surveys? Like, did you consider mailing them things? Or what was your process for thinking through how to collect data cards? Or this can be for anyone on the session, if you want to type in the chat box as well. I don't want to put our guest speakers on the spot.
I think in all our cases, the reason we're hesitant is because for the cohorts that we currently have going on, I think the thing is we already had the data card, so it made it a lot easier. That's one of the positives, that when you go back and you tap into previous cohorts, you generally have the data cards already. So it helps you out with that.
Definitely. And someone did ask, has anyone tried Google Forms for data cards? I mean, that's a similar format to SurveyMonkey, so I don't see why not. We've done that for outreach, for kind of surveys to help inform the planning or the type of program that we were going to provide. Great. And then let's see, I want to make sure I'm seeing all the classes or all the questions. So So Oscar asks, sometimes scheduling a class at a time that all participants are available is a challenge. Any experience with a platform that participants can access at any time they want to on their own schedule, at their own pace, similar to online college classes? Oscar, that's what eatfresh.org mini course does. So check that out if you're interested in learning more about that, reach out. And does anyone else know of interactive media that you can leverage, similar to what Oscar is asking, like when people can just take it on their own time? Oh, and actually, Bethany just chimed in about data cards. So I heard from Catholic Charities Stockton that they mailed data cards, lesson plans, and other info with an addressed envelope for them to send back. They also called ahead of the first class to explain contents of the packet. That's a great idea. Great. Okay, so we can stay on for a couple more minutes. It is 11. There is a question for Lena. Did you develop a handout for step-by-step TA on WebEx?
That is a good question. So remember, this is our first time doing this. We're so new to this. So that is something we will definitely consider for future classes. I think that's not a bad idea at all. With WebEx, it seemed like it was pretty easy. I think as we continue doing this, that might be the more efficient way to do it. As of right now, all we've done is talk to people one-on-one and provide that TA when needed. Other than that, people have kind of been able to figure it out through the email invite and telling them to click here. And generally, some of the things for some people are quite easy. And then for others who need that extra support, they reach out. Not a bad idea to create some handout like that we can mail out.
Great. So I think, oh, was someone else gonna chime in? Okay, so big thanks to everyone for joining us today, especially Carolyn, Lena, and Nick. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your stories. We hope that you all decide to join our private Facebook group so we can continue sharing with and learning from one another. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining our series, and we hope you have a great day. And we can stay, the Leah's Pantry team can stay on the line, but just sign off whenever you want to. Thank you. No, that's not your name, but I see it posted. So we haven't experienced issues with quality of video when using shared screen function. Maybe it's an issue of bandwidth. So you said it appears normal on the presenter end, but choppy video and poor audio quality on the participant end. I mean, if this is a continued problem, it might be a good opportunity to use recorded videos then, if there's some bandwidth issue, because I'm not sure how you could address that other than just changing the quality of the internet access.